Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack. We're joined now by Brandon Lee Goutwin from Bleeding Green Nation. You can follow him at Brandon Goutwin on X and read all his work at bleedinggreennation.com. BLG, how you doing on this Wednesday, June 18th edition, brother?
Doing good, guys. How's it going?
Dead, BLG, dead. It's the dead period, which I kind of like. Gives me a little bit of a breather, at least for a small portion of time. But I saw our buddy and your buddy, John Stolness, over at bleedinggreennation.com talking about list season, which I always mock myself. And John asked a good question, so I'll ask it to you and try to write about it. Is Philadelphia capable of appreciating a team as good as the Eagles have been in recent seasons? What's your thoughts on that, BLG?
Yeah, I think like fans individually, you can sit back and relax maybe at the shore this summer, say something to your friends among like, oh, it's awesome. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. But at the same time, I think when it comes to, being part of any kind of like online community, which we are to some extent being here, or the comment section at Bleeding Green Nation or anything like that, Twitter, the conversation isn't as simple and it wouldn't be as fun if it's just everyone agrees all the time. So there's going to be, disagreements and discourse at all times.
Yeah.
No doubt about that, BLG. BLG, I want to ask you about a player that I brought up with John yesterday. We didn't talk about him yet on the show today, but it's Jordan Davis. And I want to see where you are on this player and what your expectation or your desire for him as a player moving forward to become. And I think we can move on from the 13th overall pick and kind of say, all right, how valuable is he to now? But what does the Eagles, what do they want him to become? Is it like you draft a guy at 13 and he just stops the run? You would hope you drafted one of the best run stoppers in the world. Like, he's not that good of a run stopper. Do they want him to be a pass rusher? How do you see this situation unfolding with Jordan Davis? He is kind of in a contract year with the extension looming in the fifth-year option, which they did pick up.
Yeah, I think last year, if you factor in the playoffs, Jordan Davis, played the fourth most snaps of any defensive tackle on the team behind.
Yeah, Morrow was ahead of him. Yeah.
Yep, and they actually played the same amount. Jordan Davis and Morrow Jomo played the same amount in the regular season. They were both at 388, but then Jomo was obviously ahead of him in the playoffs there. So I want to see him at the very least, be a top 3 defensive tackle, which I think he will be, barring injury or anything on this team. I mean, that is like the bare minimum. Especially for the investment they have in him. Look, I'm interested to see. We've talked about the fitness and all that so many times now. It's been a constant.
It's every off
season. I do think what Jordan said specifically was and coupled with what Vic said as well. Vic really, highlighting how he felt like Jordan was in his best shape later in the season, and then Jordan talking about how. Being more, he said discipline, is his word for the year in 2025. And I think, the pressure of being in this spot now where, they picked up his option, but he knows that, his rookie deal is coming to an end here. And that if he wants a big payday, he's going to have to make a jump and make a leap to being a different kind of player, I think, ultimately than he's been, at least production wise, to this point. And, I look at Dexter Lawrence, and that's it's a high, mark for him to get to, but I look at someone like that who kind of made that jump in the 4th year of their career, and I think there's potential for him. I'm not ready to say I'm giving up on Jordan Davis, but he has a lot to prove at this point.
Here's my take, and I think a lot of people don't look at it from the approach of, I always say, like, why, and I probably asked you this before, and I apologize if I did, BLG, but why, especially when you look at last season and you still had Milton Williams. Right now it's a little bit different because Morrow, I think Morrow is going to be a good player, but that's projection. The way Milton was playing last season, and obviously you have Jalen Carter. Why would you want Jordan Davis on the field on 3rd and 13? And I think if people look at it that way, it's like, yeah, even Dexter Lawrence, who I think you point out is the best sort of nose tackle pass rusher in the NFL and the best sort of collaboration. I wouldn't want him on the field on 3rd and 13 with last year's Eagles because Carter's obviously a better pass rusher, and so is Milton. So it's like there are nose tackles. Like I want him to get to a point where he can be Vita Bea and push the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Even Vita Bea. I don't want him on the field on 3rd and 13. I want a better pass rusher on the field. I think if people look at it that way, it makes more sense. On the other hand, the Zander's import, we should say, all right, 13th overall pick, but that's real from the business aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jordan Davis is in the category where, like Dallas is next year, or Josh was this year. They have too many good players. They probably can't pay him. That's where I think we're headed.
Yeah, I'm curious because, look, they took this 5th-year option decision down to the wire. And I don't think that was just a matter of, coincidence or like timing in terms of how they announced it. I think that was because I think they were, thinking about it. And I think, at least from what Jeff McLean has had to say too in his reporting, that they were kind of monitoring, what his conditioning and attitude was like this offseason and factoring that into the decision. Now you could say, like maybe that's not the best sign if you have to factor that into your decision, but they did clearly, I think. So even if he's not playing 3rd down, like you're saying, John, like I just think we need to see more impact. Like there has to be more. Stats aren't everything, especially with a player like him. But you're talking about 3.5 sacks in 3 years here. Like sacks are.
Well, I think the playoffs is better. Yeah, if it comes in the matter of game, that's great. I think you need and to your point about the conditioning. Yeah, we have this discussion, and maybe they contacted his favorite Peloton driver or teacher.
Yeah,
but and hopefully that gets him to the point. Where I do think is. Milton played 600 plus snaps last year. I think those can't all go to Moro Ojomo, who already played,
right.
400 plus himself. So he does have to play more in those situations just as a rotational. And I think you need more production. And it'd be nice if he could get to that Vita Bea level where he's getting consistent push. But at the end of the day, I'm like, how are they going to sign this guy? Because I think there's other teams who don't have as many good players who are willing to go, all right, we'll take a shot on this guy. He's really talented, and we're going to give him significant money. I think it's going to be really tough from a business aspect to get to that 2nd level contract with Jordan Davis, unfortunately.
It could be, yeah. I think if he gets to where the Dexter Lawrence leap was, he goes to 7.5 sacks and 7 TFLs. He makes a Pro Bowl. He's 2nd team All Pro in his 4th year there. I think if you see that kind of leap, maybe they just say we're not letting this guy walk out of the building. Maybe you can get him at a rate that is better than you would expect, considering that he hasn't produced a ton early to this point in his career. But because they're just typically not in the business of letting homegrown players walk for the most part, not every case. Certainly a 1st-round pick, that's not really, there isn't a big precedent for that. But yeah, that would be a very good outcome though. Like if what you're saying happens, then they're going to get a comp pick for him and they'll take that.
Yeah, that's part of it too. Yeah. I do think he'll get a decent contract, pretty significant contract. Because I think he's a really good player, but the Eagles just have it, and they have too many good players. They have too many good. That's what we're going through this year and this offseason. The whole sort of rebooting, we call it the Tamu offseason. All the 1-year deals, all the saving the cash. That's for Jalen Carter. That's for Nolan Smith. That's for Quinyon Mitchell down the road, Cooper DeJean. And they're already paying Jalen and AJ and Devontae and Saquon and Landon. There's a lot of good players on this team, a lot of good players, which brings me to my next point. It is list season. What if I say to you, because Joe DeCamera got in a lot of trouble this week for not putting Jalen Hurts on his whatever it was, top 11 athlete. So it's everything. It's all encompassing. But but I'm just talking the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
And I defended Joe a little bit from the perspective of, now I would have put him on my top 11 because I would not put, it might be 11 Eagles, to be honest. I'm exaggerating. Don't get upset, Phillies fans, but there'd be a lot of Eagles on that list. But if I look at the Eagles, just the Eagles, is Jalen Hurts in your top 5 football players on the Philadelphia Eagles?
It's hard, right? Because
I can't get him in that top. I can't get him in that top 5.
You got to have Lane, got to have Saquon, got to have AJ.
Right. Yeah, those are all.
I got to have Jordan Mailata. He was the best player in football.
Probably got to have Mailata, and probably got to have Carter.
Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
Devontae Smith. Landon Dickerson.
I don't know. I might go Jalen at 5 above Carter, Dickerson, and Devontae.
For people, I have no problem with people that do that, but they're doing that because they want to do it. I'm saying, do your job. That's how I describe it, BLG.
Are you telling me I'm going Homer to get Jalen in there, Johnny Mac?
Who does their job the best?
Right.
Do you think Landon Dickerson is a better left guard than Jalen Hurts as a quarterback?
Yeah.
I think he might be the best left guard in football.
Right. But then, I think it's hard not to include the positional value, though.
Well, I agree.
Because, let's say Jake Elliott, had an amazing year, which he didn't last year. But let's say he had, we're talking about 2023 Jake Elliott. He would be better than Jalen Hurts his job, but also, he's a kicker. So it's tough.
But here's how I describe that, because I agree with you. But if God forbid Jalen Hurts gets injured this season, Tanner McKee immediately becomes the most important player on the Eagles. The most important player on the Eagles. Any quarterback is, from the worst quarterback to the best quarterback, because of the importance of the position. So to me, that's baked in when I'm talking about best football players. But if that were to happen, and I would say, well, yeah, Jalen Carter isn't as important as Tanner McKee, but he's a better football player. Nobody would wink. Nobody would. They'd say, of course, of course. So I think Dave Zangaro does. Ed and I do 25 best Eagles players every year during the dead period. And that's how I define it. Who does their job the best? Dave does 25 most important Eagles. Yeah. And to me, I don't do it that way because it's always the quarterback.
Right.
Number one. Always. So that's why I think the best at their job is a more interesting conversation, at least.
Yeah. Good friend Jimmy Kemsky, I think, does the 10 players the Eagles can least afford to lose to injury. So he uses that framing. And
that will always be Jalen, number 1, I assume.
It's actually, it is. Okay, this year. I was looking at his list. I don't think it has been in the past, though.
Saquon's got to be 2, right?
I think it's Jalen Carter, too. But, yeah, I think that's fair as well. Saquon's 3, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's so many good players you can make arguments. But Lane, we have a history. AJ, we have a history. They can't, they don't perform well when those guys are not on the field. And there's so many good players on this team.
Right.
It really is. Howie deserves a lot of credit, man. And Jeffrey deserves a lot of credit putting together a system that allows you to pay all these players by using those roster bonuses and the voidable years and all that kind of stuff.
And cash.
Cash over cap.
Yeah. BLG, earlier in the show, we were talking about whether the Eagles, what they would have to do to reach dynasty level, real dynasty, not like dynasty. Fan talk though, the Steelers, the Niners, the Cowboys.
Can you tell it's the off season, BLG?
You can't tell it's the off season, but
that's a fair question.
Yeah, how much more? Well, I'll ask you that. You can answer that too, but I want to ask you a little bit about what John was talking about when John told the fans in the open. I hope every Eagles fan's enjoying this because this level of winning doesn't happen a lot in a lot of different places very often. So enjoy it. Who do you think deserves the credit for all this winning that's happened in Philly? Is it Jeffrey Lurie, the way he's constructed the team? Is it Nick and Jalen? When those two showed up, it feels like things just got into high gear. Is it Howie Roseman? Who do you think deserves the most credit for the level of winning that they've achieved recently?
I think it's Jeffrey Lurie. Absolutely.
That's
because
where I went. That's where I went.
I mean, it's him and Howie are the common threads basically outside of the four players who were there for both Super Bowl rings between 2017 and 2024 here. And I think look, Howie's done a great job and not taking anything away from him, but I think he's also uniquely empowered than other general managers are, and that is a testament to. And look, there's many times, and myself included, where Jeffrey Lurie is getting a lot of criticism for sticking by Howie Roseman, and to be able to stick with, and fairly so, and to be able to stick with him through those lows, because I still think to this day that Howie probably doesn't get enough guff for how bad the post first Super Bowl Eagles were in terms of like his part in that. I think Doug, ultimately wore a lot of that blame. That he did deserve some too, but I think Howie deserved a lot also. Now again, Howie quickly dug himself out of it, so great job by him. And that's one of his strengths, is he is able to dig himself out of these holes he kind of makes for himself sometimes. But certainly he played a big role in that team falling off after the Super Bowl. And I think the Eagles could have reasonably moved on from him. Other owners might have done that for sure. Yeah. So I think Jeffrey Lurie's patience and his vision here is ultimately like the biggest reason for this team's success.
I remember I was doing the show with Jody at the time when they fired Doug, and Jody was like, "Well, you got to fire Howie," and I'm like, "I don't think they should fire Howie." But yeah, there were a lot of people who thought, "Well, what are you firing the Super Bowl winning coach for? If why is the GM getting another opportunity to hire another coach?"
Do you guys think that's what saved Nick Sirianni after the collapse? Like the thought for Lurie of firing two Super Bowl winning coaches, or no, not Super Bowl. Nick wasn't Super Bowl winning at the time, but he had went to one in a 4-year span. Do you think that's what saved Nick? Because I do think Jeffrey thought about that.
I think what saved Nick is him being more amenable to changes than certainly Doug was.
That's
I use the term political. Nick's more political.
So politically,
if he would have dug it and said, "No, I'm not firing Brian Johnson," I think he would have gotten fired.
Yeah.
I mean,
agree.
He's more, and now and by the way, done an excellent job with it. Obviously, let's be honest, he was forced to go outside the organization. It worked out very well. And now he's back with a guy he's very comfortable with, in Kevin Patullo. And we'll see how that works out. And that's going to be one of the big stories, because as it was last year, when things aren't going well offensively, obviously Kevin's going to get a lot of whats. Although people might blame some of it on Nick as well, but that's just the nature of it. And that might be the most interesting story, I think, of this entire season, how that goes, because you know how it works, BLG. I mean, when they promoted Brian Johnson, it didn't work. And when they went outside the organization with Kellen, it did work. In reality, you can make a strong argument that Brian had a better offense.
Right.
And the defense was what derailed it. But the perception is, and if it happens again and you promote from within, it'll be, well, you should have won outside the organization. And I don't know how you fix that. Is there any way to fix that other than just win and shut everybody up?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard from a standpoint too. I'm of the belief that they should absolutely be doing, like real searches in these cases and not just hand the job to someone internally. I mean, they literally like have to in terms of the Rooney rule, but in terms of actual, desire and want to, and not just, checking a checkbox to say you did it. Because I think that's what, will get you the best candidate more often than not. At the same time, I think one thing that probably doesn't get like talked about enough in terms of like the human element of how, like it's kind of tough if you're Kevin Patullo and you're grinding and you're doing a good job from what we know, or at least seem to be, and, ultimately contributing to this team's Super Bowl success. And then when it comes for promotion time, they hire someone from outside of the organization who wasn't here to build that Super Bowl team to go ahead of you. Like that's kind of a tough, dynamic for him. And look, it's a business. So sometimes I think you have to make those tough decisions. And certainly that's what they do with players sometimes too. they'll sign a free agent over another player who may have been coming up the
Yeah.
ranks. So that's part of it. Is what it is, and that's just kind of tough luck. But at the same time, I think Nick Sirianni gets so few input or so little input ultimately in a lot of these big decisions, and that's clearly worked for the team. I'm not saying they should change that. That I think if he really wants, his certain guy offensive coordinator, if you're throwing him like one bone, I think he gets like one bone to have there.
There you go. So yeah, one little bone for you, and you're good. All right, I'm going to go full off season here. BLG, ready? We've seen 1 year of both Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. You reserve the right to change your opinion on this at any time, obviously. Who do you feel like after seeing 1 year is going to have a better career?
Yeah, I want to say Cooper DeJean. And that's, it's no shot at Quinyon, who I'm also very high on. But, I mean, Cooper's the younger player, so I think there's something to be said for that in terms of, like, hasn't even maybe hit his full, or at least won't be hitting his full prime, at least as soon as Quinyon might. He's only 22. I think Quinyon's 24 here.
Yeah.
Also, just
Haley Ringo is still younger than
that's right.
Yeah,
crazy, which is crazy.
I also think like the positional versatility is a factor in that. I think there's more avenues to success for Cooper DeJean because I think there's different spots he can excel at. Where I think Quinyon mostly going to be an outside guy. Obviously, we saw him play a little bit inside last summer, but I don't think that's going to be a long term or really much of a thing again, barring injuries. So, and also I think again, don't dislike Quinyon Mitchell, but I think one of his strengths might be that he's so sticky in coverage and he deters a lot of throws where you might maybe I don't know. And honestly, I don't think he has the best hands either, which we'll see, if he's able to work on that. I don't know how much of a playmaker he's going to be as much as he's just a really shut down corner. Whereas Cooper, I think we've seen, is a playmaker. And not just in terms of interceptions and stuff like that, too, but also what he did to Derrick Henry, being a force, too, as a tackler. I think he's just, has the more diverse skill set overall. So, again, both really good players, but I think Cooper DeJean, to me, I think he has the higher ceiling.
Talking about Cooper makes me think about the return game because I think he's a really good punt returner as well. I know it, but I don't think they want him to return punts. And I'm a little bit, concerned about the return game coming off the spring. They signed Avery Williams, who could do both in theory. They lost Kenny Gainwell. They lost Isaiah Rodgers, who were their two primary kick returners last year. They evidently don't want Will doing it. And in theory, it might get more important. Punt returns are always important, but even kickoff returns, because they're bringing out the touchback to the 35 now. So people might be more susceptible to try to kick it in that landing zone. We're really getting in the weeds, but that's what we do here. Any concerns after seeing an entire – they had Danny Gray, Shunderick Powell, and Montrell Johnson as the kick returners.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't matter, but it could be an issue. I guess you could default to Cooper and Will, and then you're fine, but do you really want to go that route?
Yeah, I really want to see what Avery Williams can do. I was bummed that we didn't get to see him in the spring at all. Definitely going to be monitoring him in training camp, assuming he's healthy enough to practice at that point, which I guess he would be.
Any idea? I have no idea what that injury is.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, he tore his ACL, but that was like 2 years ago.
Right, yeah. I really don't know what's going on there. Yeah, so I'm not sure, but definitely want to see what he has. He has good numbers. If he is healthy, I think, that's something he might be able to do. Although we'll see if the injuries have taken a toll on him at all. other than that, I mean, Cooper DeJean, I think is someone you use in like gotta have it situation. If there's it's late in the game or it's a crucial kind of spot, I think you can go to that if you really have to and break him out.
I like that idea. They did that with Devontae a couple times.
Yeah. And Deshaun even a little bit. Like I think as he got older, it's like if you have to have it, then you can kind of use that option there. So you still have that in your back pocket. But yeah, for the main guys, it's unsettled. I think it's Avery Williams. He might be doing both, but otherwise, you're looking at long shots like he talked about. Maybe Taylor Morin can do it. I think he had some good punt return numbers for Wake Forest. Giles Jackson. But, I mean,
Giles was on kickoffs as well. I should have mentioned Giles Jackson. Yeah. I don't know if I should have mentioned him.
I don't think you should have, but he was there.
He was there taking some kickoff. I didn't see punt return. I don't think they did punt return.
Correct. They did not.
Yeah. So your point about Taylor Moore, he was a good punt returner. So maybe there's some more. Maybe he could be this year's Britton Covey.
Yeah.
Who knows? You never
Taylor
know.
Moore. Why does it feel like that's the first time I've ever heard that name? And all I do in my life is talk about the freaking Eagles, and I
pride myself on mentioning every single player on the
I know.
team.
I'm just messing, John. I'm just making the point that we're in no man's land with some of these names.
Correct.
Taylor, but he went to Wake Forest. He was a good punt returner. Very Britton Covey-like.
He is
small, undersized.
He's older for a rookie too.
Who picked up Covey? Who picked up Covey? Was it Rams?
The Rams.
Yeah. And I hope he's healthy, and I hope because he was that injury was pretty significant. But good dude, Britton Covey.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, BLG, last one for me. I brought it up to you earlier. Sorry, John, if I cut you. Do you have one more thing to say there?
No, just he was a very good punt returner, and for some reason, I think he didn't get the credit for how good he was.
Yeah,
he was good, no doubt about it. BLG, last one. We brought up the Dynasty talk. Yeah, well, what do you think? How many do they have to win before they're a real? Not you're an Eagles fan. I think you are. I know you cover the team, but I think you're an Eagles fan. I'm an Eagles fan, not an Eagles fan take of like, hey, we're a Dynasty. What do they have to do to become a real dynasty in the NFL? Is it 3 in the next 5 years? What is it? What do you think?
I feel like 3 growing up, people, would talk about like the Patriots.
That's what I said, 3. Yeah, great minds.
3 was always the number that came up. Because I think like almost not literally anyone can win one because clearly teams can't, but like more random championships can happen for sure. When you do it 2 in a little short amount of time, I think you're, it's weird. It's a weird time frame because it's like it is close, but at the same time, so many of the players were different other than 4.
Right. Do you include 17 or no?
See, I don't because different coach, different quarterback.
It is tough.
Yeah.
But if they do win one, let's just say they repeat. Having gone to one where, that came very close down to the wire and having won one, I think you're in that, the conditions are ripe. As we're not. It's not like
they're on the cusp.
It's Dynasty watch as opposed to like like with a tornado. Right. It's like if the conditions are right for the tornado, it's tornado watch. But if you actually see a tornado, then it's tornado warning. So I think that's more like Dynasty watch than Dynasty warning.
I like that. that. I always get watch and warning confused.
Warning's the bad one. You don't want warning.
Yeah. All right, I like that. At Brandon Gouton, make sure you follow BLG on the X platform. Read him and his staff every day, bleedinggreennation.com. Mention John Stolness. He's got a piece up there now, so check that out. Always fun. I'll leave you with a lot of good stuff, BLG, and the nice drop of Taylor Morin. I appreciate it.
As always, BLG, thank you, brother. We appreciate it, man.
Thanks,
see you guys.
All right, there's BLG here on Birds 365. Great stuff from BLG. Great stuff from Mike Gill today. A fun show today, Johnny Mac, as we do here in the middle of June. Always a good time kicking things around and stuff like that. Boy, that punt returner stuff is kind of interesting. I'm kind of with you on it that it's one of the things that.
It's one of those things. Again, the Eagles are so good. You're nitpicking everything. At the end of the day, if nothing works, you just put Cooper DeJean. You have one of the best one of the best 5 punt returners of football. It's just got to do double duty, which in a best case scenario world, you don't want to put that on his plate because he's so important to the defense. But if you have to, like they did last year because of Britton's injury, you have to, and you have a great punt returner. So I can't get too concerned over it, but and the same thing with Will Shipley, not to the level of Cooper on kick returns. You know he can do it at a pretty effective rate, even though you don't want him to do it. But if he has to, you're fine. So it's tough to get, worried about it, but it was it was notable that Avery Williams wasn't ready to go in the spring. And because I think a lot of people who do their early 53-man roster, like everybody's got him on the team. I'm not sure you can make that definitive assessment any longer. A long way to go. If he's healthy for the start of training camp, he might get right back to that level. But we haven't seen him, so it's tough to judge anything.
Let's get to some super chats here. Good commentary there. Great stuff from BLG and Mike Gill today. Chip Tooth, look at this. $5. He checks in and he says, back in December, I wrote y'all about the birth of my son, Braxton. Love that name, by the way. He is now 6 months old and loves watching J-Mac with me every morning. He's a big J-Mac guy.
All right. Yeah, that's my demographic, the 6 months old. They love me.
Yeah, you're I don't know if you realize this, but you're elongating your illustrious career right now. You have 6 months old coming up, John, waiting to hear from your takes on the Philadelphia Eagles, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm still going to be having those takes when he turns 6'6", never mind 16. So
yeah,
but I appreciate it. And
big shout out to Braxton today. I'll give a clap up for Braxton. Chip Tube, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Brandon says the YNs are out of control. I don't know what that. I think he means like I'm not going to use that phrase obviously on the show, but I know what that means. Brandon, I don't know why you put that in a super chat. You just made it obviously a hard thing to read, but guess talking about the incident we talked about with Ruggs.
Yeah, I missed it. It's going over my head. I guess
YN is like young N word is what it is basically what it means. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Come on, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Come on. Put me in a bad spot up here. But all right, Johnny Mac, that's it for all of our super chats today. Appreciate everybody chatting in today. We've had a great crowd in here. As always, Johnny Mac, where should we end it? I want to end it somewhere good. I want to end it somewhere good today because we had a good fun show today with a lot of different topics between.
You don't want to end it on Taylor Morin?
I don't. I don't. That name just doesn't excite me, John. I don't want to end it on Taylor Morin, but is he going to make the team?
No, I don't think so. But again, there's a lot of comparisons to Britton Covey, undrafted free agent, undersized, good punt returner, good productive college player. It's one of those guys that seems to have that similar ability to do everything well, but he's just undersized. And I think he might make a play or two in the preseason and everybody will start talking about him.
Well, there you go. Taylor Morin. Keep it on the name to watch. All right. One more.
I mean, if you would have said Britton Covey would have made the team when I would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Britton showed it's possible.
That's true.
And they need a punt returner. It's where Anais Smith can win his job. But, we haven't seen it develop yet.
Brian Pumper checks in with a super chat. What's a show that a Pumper super? Thank you, Brian. He says, NFL terms, VJ Edgecombe is the Jalen Reagor of the draft. Ace is the most obvious no-brainer pick, a.k.a. Jay Jettis. Don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe.
Well, I got a feeling the Sixers are going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe. But if the Sixers stay, I got news for you. This is how little respect I have for the Sixers, and I apologize to Dave Schaller in advance. If they pick Ace Bailey, I will consider it a mistake. And if they pick BJ Edgecombe, I will consider it a mistake. Whatever they do, they're going to fuck it up. That's where I am with the Sixers.
John, you got the Sixers and Bears category, right?
So if you're an Ace Bailey fan, you better hope he doesn't come to Philadelphia because they will buck it up.
Brian Pumper, do you agree or disagree? Brian Pumper's like, you got to admit, Brian Pumper's a way with words, doesn't he? We got to get this guy writing or something. This guy's a way with words. Have you ever used the pumperism in one of your articles?
No. Most of them are cannot be published in a reputable publication. So
no, they can't. Brian Pumper, sorry to say that, but that is the truth, my friend. Johnny Mac, your final thoughts on the show today, brother?
Yeah, I guess I went too harsh on Yannick Noah yesterday. I went too harsh on the Sixers today, but what the heck? It's the offseason.
I don't think you went too hard on the Sixers. Not even a little bit. I think you could have upped the ante.
Yeah, and I said, did I just say Yannick Noah? Yannick Ngakwe. Yannick Noah was the old tennis player for those.
So we had somebody was watching because I post up our segments on the channel. Somebody watched our segment yesterday where we talked about Yannick, but we didn't have the answer yet. And it was cut off because it was after the break. And everybody thought it was somebody different. They didn't think it was Yannick. I'd have to go and look at the comments who they thought it was, but it wasn't. They were wrong about, obviously, your thoughts on Yannick Ngakwe.
Yeah. Well, because he had a lot of sacks, and that proves the point. They think he's a good player, and it hasn't been the case. It hasn't been the case.
All right, one more super chat. Dio says, Mad Dio, what's up, brother? Good to see you in here, man. Hope you're well. I remember talking to Dio on the post-game show many a times. He says, East Coast and wrapping up Dad's estate. Thank you for the distraction and entertainment. My friend, you are more than welcome. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the support of the channel, as always, Dio.
Yeah, appreciate it. Difficult time. So, yeah. Glad we could take your mind off it because that could be an issue when you're trying to take care of somebody's estate. Yeah.
Yeah. Dio, thank you, brother. Johnny Mac, great show today, brother. We appreciate it. We'll catch you tomorrow on a Thursday edition of Birds 365. Thank you, brother.
All right. Thanks, all.
All right. There's Johnny Mac. John McMullen here on a great episode of Birds 365, a Wednesday, June 18th edition. Why was that such a fun show?